Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And one of the reasons I love recording this podcast every single day is the sharing of stories. And sometimes I meet the occasional guest on here that I could listen to them and their stories all night around a campfire with a glass of whiskey. And by that, I don't necessarily mean tech stories, but you know those kind of people that you meet that are just naturally engaging and just seem to wow you on every level with their experiences and facts that they pull out of the air and their stories. Well, today's guest was just like that. And I'll be honest with you, there was so much that wasn't on this interview that I wish we could have used, but I'd just not hit record. And his name is Derick Schaefer, and he is the CTO of Trintech, which is an accounting software company. So trust me when I say Derick is a super interesting guy. He spent a decade at Microsoft early in his career, then went through engineering roles in areas from digital banking to blogging, before he ended up at Trintech. But it's his passion for his work that really shines. And today we're going to be talking about Trintech's mission to take the drudgery out of accounting, why the best kind of innovation comes from customers, and yes, we might wander off topic now and again and talk about his passions outside of the workplace and the causes that really matter to him. Intrigued? I was hoping you were. So buckle up and hold on tight so I can beam your ears all the way to Dallas, Texas, so we can speak with Derick Schaefer, CTO of Trintech. So a massive warm welcome to the show. A big thank you for joining me all the way from Texas today. But can you tell the listeners a little more about who you are and what you do?
Neil, thanks for the warm welcome and thanks for having me. Trintech is a unique company. We are not only a pioneer, but we're a market leader in what is referred to as the cloud financial close solution space. We've got two flagship offerings. One, Cadency, targets large enterprises, which typically have the characteristics of large transaction volumes. And in many cases, they will have multiple enterprise resource planning systems or ERPs. Their complexities are high. And our Cadency solution set is not only set up to help them facilitate a faster and more accurate financial close, but it can deal with those complexities in a routine way. The second flagship offering we have is called ADRA, and ADRA targets mid-market companies, and it's a really exciting solution set in that it harnesses the power of the same financial close solution that Cadency does, but it really targets the goal of being simple, easy to set up, and a very fast ROI, which is greatly appreciated by mid-market companies, ones that have lower transaction volumes, and generally a single ERP system that they're driving their business off of. As the Chief Technology Officer, I am part of the executive leadership team, and I do have responsibility for our software engineering across both Cadency and ADRA, as well as the SaaS operations of those solutions in both our private and public cloud offerings. I run our information security function at the company, as well as our internal IT.
A lot of people I speak with every day don't actually start out in the tech industry. So I'd love to know, did you start out in fintech or the world of finance?
I don't come from the accounting industry. I have spent over 15 years in fintech. But my father, when I was a kid, invented a ruler for accountants that was longer to fit ledger pages and had a squiggly line on one side so that the double underline process, which was quite cumbersome, and you couldn't tell whether it was a double underline or a single, it took the pain out of doing that, and it became a de facto standard in the accounting industry in the United States. So by the time I hit university, and I went to the University of Texas, huge business school, huge accounting school, over 50,000 students, I was known on campus as the guy who could actually get a hold of what they called the wiggly green ruler.
Wow.
Obviously, the processes have gone computerized, though I've certainly got boxes of them at home. The wiggly green ruler is no longer prevalent in the accounting industry, but it's back to that theme of how do you make an accountant more accurate, right? Single underline versus double underline, and how do you make them more efficient, save them time? So it's kind of fun to come full circle.
Oh man, what a fantastic story. And there will be people tuning in from all over the world to hear your story today. And for those people that are hearing about Trintech for the very first time, could you possibly just set the scene and tell me a little bit more about exactly the kind of problems you solve for businesses at Trintech and also how you transform their financial processes?
Neil, I'm glad you mentioned that your listener base is a global listener base. Trintech's a global company. We've got offices in North America, Europe, and in Asia. But an interesting fact is that we were actually founded close to 30 years ago in Dublin, Ireland, with a loose association to some individuals at Trinity University, hence the Trin and Trintech. And the original innovations were around commerce transactions, which evolved into e-commerce transactions. And where we found ourselves was at the heart of the Office of Finance, dealing with some of the complications and time-consuming work that it required to account for transactions as a part of the financial close process. So we quickly engaged and pioneered solutions in what we would call reconciliations. And reconciliations happen in kind of two ways. One of those operational reconciliations where we're looking at transactions and banking transactions, whether it be credit card or other forms of bank transactions, and matching those to statements at the end of the month, into the quarter. And our goal there is to increase the accuracy of that financial work, as well as reduce the time associated with dealing with large volumes of transactions. So you can imagine in any B2C world or even online and e-commerce, the number of transactions that can take place in a given period can be quite daunting. The second area is around balance sheet reconciliations, which is kind of at the heart of the financial close process. And again, we're looking to increase accuracy and reduce time in that space. And when we do that right, the adjacencies in our solution actually allow us to create clean audit trails for both internal and external audit, which produces better audit outcomes, and generally a more accurate and faster time to close the books, which is really, really important for the Office of Finance today.
And I believe that Trintech's mission is to take the drudgery out of accounting and ultimately make it faster and more efficient and more human. But I'm curious, I've been interviewed over 1,000 leaders on this podcast. One thing that I've noticed is a lot of these companies are actually born out of frustration and people wanting to solve those problems that they encounter. So can you tell me a little bit more about the inspiration behind Trintech and how you got where you are today?
Yeah, so Trintech has been in the business of transactions since its inception, and it's been in the fintech space since its inception. And as a part of that journey, one of the things we quickly realized is that companies, and specifically departments of finance, are constantly looking to match list A with list B. And we refer to that as a reconciliation, right? And so as we evolved the company and evolved our solution set, we built software that focused on helping people, for example, take a credit card statement that could have thousands, if not tens or hundreds of thousands of transactions, and match those to a statement and ensure that list A matched to list B. The same thing would happen with bank statements and bank accounts. We were born in the large enterprise space and realized that the large enterprise solve was very different than the mid-market solve. And we, through acquisition and through innovation of our own, have come to market with a mid-market solution that focuses on the specific problems that are presented in that space. But you nail it in that departments of finance are looking to not cut cost and eliminate headcount. Right now, through third-party independent studies, we know that financial departments are spending about 75% of their time in the drudgery and only 25% of that time performing analytics. And the goal is to flip that. And at Trintech, our customers, the time that they spend on balance sheet reconciliations and actually matching transactions with accounts decreases by 60%. And the overall time to close the books decreases by 50%. So what companies are able to do is redeploy that resource into analytics type tasks and being able to look forward in the business versus spending their time in the rearview mirror trying to make sense of what happened last month or last quarter or last year.
I always say on this podcast that technology works best when it brings people together. And what really stood out for me when I first heard about Trintech was, yes, you make things more efficient, but it's that key element again, you make it more human. So when it comes to making it more human, where do you begin in areas such as DevOps, security, and engineering cultures?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, those are, in my view, two different topics. If you look at the solutions that are presented to the Office of Finance and specifically in accounting solutions, people are independent workers that are organized into teams, and the teams are expected to work together for a single financial close solution. So one of our reference customers with our mid-market solution set, which is referred to as ADRA, they ran their business prior to implementing ADRA. They ran their business on over 700 spreadsheets, and the transport mechanism between team members of those spreadsheets was literally the dreaded attach and reply all, attach and forward. So if you just think about that from a cultural perspective, people working independently on rows, columns, and cells, and using email to try to collaborate on a solution, you can already see the headwinds in a process such as that. So if you look at what ADRA does across our matching product, our task management product, and our balancer product, we integrate those all into one with clearly defined mechanisms for creating closed tasks and lists and being able to take the output from the automation. And what you want to have in the end state is for people who understand the business to be able to go and approve the business as usual, right? So we automate the business as usual and have people to look at that and say that's right, and then focus their time on the exceptions. And that's where you'd want to take that out of the system, use the output from the system, get into a meeting room, get onto a call, and figure out whether there's a challenge with something that happened in a previous period, or there's just additional work to be done because it's something new that hasn't been experienced.
And another buzzword a lot of people are chasing at the moment is innovation. And I'm curious, in all your experience, do you find that the best kind of innovation comes from those internal creative teams where we've put people together and in a room and asked them to try and be more innovative? Or do you think we underestimate how more often than not, it's actually the customers teaching companies how to innovate, if only they would listen?
At Trintech, we firmly believe in the latter. Yeah. And innovation is a buzzword today. And I think we often confuse that exponential innovation that hits the headlines. And I would argue that what Trintech has done with the financial close process is exponential innovation, because we are literally changing the way that departments approach a task that is not only a requirement, but it's just a critical part of the business. But then as you look at the big buzzword topics of whether they be robotics, artificial intelligence, big data, those are very IT and technology-centric topics of innovation. And certainly for those companies that are bringing to market those horizontal platforms, those are the right words for them. Our goal is to listen to our customers and build a fact base, and build a fact base through market data and specifically customer data to innovate this in the right way, directed at the needs of the financial departments that we service and the overall close process. So, for example, in ADRA, in our mid-market product, we launched a customer portal approximately 2 years ago, and we've had over 60 ideas submitted from our customers on how to make the product better. And it's our goal then to look at that suggestion, and some of those suggestions, in full honesty, might be a very tactical tweak to the system based on how somebody works. But we look at that, take that idea, extrapolate it, and figure out how to make that work across all of the countries, languages, different accounting rules that we service, as well as add innovation to that to even make it even better. So anytime you're just innovating inside of the four walls of your office and the customer's voice is not heard, not to say that great innovation hasn't been created that way, but in the space that we play, you're probably less set up for success. And for us, the spark, if you would, the light going on, comes from our customers and our customer innovation portal, where we have either delivered upon those original 60 ideas, or they're already planned for our roadmap. That's the way that we operate.
And I always try and research every guest that comes on this podcast and try and understand a little bit more about what motivates them outside the world of tech. And although you are a tech guy, I quickly learned that you also have a passion for causes including local theatre and water conservation. So could you expand on that and why they're so important to you?
Yeah, I think that as a leader, you look at, and as you grow in leadership, you look at the overall ecosystem where you work, where you live, and where you play. And there are a couple things that are important to both my wife and myself, and she's an executive with a company here in Dallas, is are we creating the kinds of economic benefits in what we do professionally that make the world a better place, right? And it's the word that is often the buzzword that is used is conscious capitalism. What are we doing to make the world better? And in our case, if the financial numbers aren't correct, if the close isn't accurate, and it truly is, if you think about the number of spreadsheets and the number of communications and the potential for error, if that isn't working the way that it should, we leave ourselves open for the evil words in finance of having to recast results. This impacts investors. It impacts the mutual funds that we are dependent upon to retire. That certainly my parents and relatives are living on for their retirements. And so there's a huge weight on our shoulders to get that right. The second is if we don't help companies be more efficient, and if they're not spending their time on those analytics and the strategy to take their company forward, we see what happens in this highly innovative, fast-moving economy that's literally on fire. We're seeing companies, file for bankruptcy. We're seeing companies that are facing a future that is bleak. And the financial mind and freeing up that financial mind to analyze the futures of these companies is a key part of the responsibility that we are trying to contribute to at Trintech. If you then fast forward to personally, we certainly are supporters of local arts here in the Dallas area. I'm lucky enough to office here in a small city called Addison, Texas, that has one of my favorite theater companies in the Dallas area, where we are season ticket holders, and I've got a son who dabbles in a little bit of that on his spare time. And the second thing that both my wife and I are big supporters are of the environment. We actually have taken beyond what I would call normal citizenship responsibilities of recycling and conserving the resources that we use and trying to be more energy efficient. My wife and I actually own and operate as a hobby a small cattle ranch in East Texas, where we preserve and breed Texas Longhorns, which is a very unique animal and very unique to the history of the United States as well as the state of Texas. But one of the large drivers that we have in that operation is you are a grass farmer and you are a water conservator way before you begin to breed any kind of animal. And we certainly put a lot of time, a lot of strategy, and a lot of effort, and work with both the state of Texas as well as the federal government in our efforts there to ensure that we're maintaining the beauty of the pastures that have been and the waterways that have been a huge part of the history of this state.
I absolutely love that. Not only the community aspect of it, but how you're getting out in the great outdoors, looking after your environment and making a difference. I'm curious, do you think all techies should learn to switch off a little bit more from the tech and get out in the great doors and make the difference in their own way? Because I know that's what feels to me more rewarding than anything.
So I think it's one of the common themes that I see in tech. The irony is the community, and in specific states, good friends of mine, peers of mine, even partners in joint ownership and animals are ironically executives and tech executives based here in Dallas, Texas. Yeah. So it's one of those stories of where we don't talk about work, and we do talk a lot about soil, forages, and water and animals and just overall improvements in that area. But if I click down a level into the 25 plus years that I've been in technology, whether it be developers, quality assurance engineers, architects, operators, DevOps types, the employees that have been a part of my organization, a key part of who they are and how they identify with themselves, have always been the outdoors. And I would say probably one of the more common vacations, getaways, escapes, requests for time off that I see from employees is they're going to venture into nature, into the wilderness, and be a part of that. And I think that's just a great thing about this industry, that we share that in common.
Absolutely, me too. And back to tech just for a moment. Another topic that I'm hearing more and more about is robotic process automation, or RPA. I mean, how do you see that transforming the financial space over the next few years?
Yeah, great topic, and it's key. So if you think about the challenges that you have with thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even in the large enterprise space, millions of transactions, and the end goal of being accurate and being efficient and being able to direct the eyeballs of the key personnel that you have on problem areas, on areas that needs review, on areas that are key to strategy. The rest of that, the business as usual, you're going to rely on automation. And there's two types of automation. There's automation that will simply take things that you would just expect to match up. So, accounts that have zero balances month over month, and might see a single transaction at the end of a quarter, the end of a year. You want that to operate as kind of business as usual and let automation do its job. But more importantly, as those bots look and incorporate risk intelligence into them, you want to be able to look for exception, which could be, in best case, an error, a double billing from a vendor, a misbilling from a vendor, or unfortunately enough, we still have to deal with this in financial services. It could be an element of fraud. So, a transaction that takes place in the same way with a fairly sizable amount, quarter over quarter for multiple years, and all of a sudden you see a transaction related to it that is abnormal. It falls outside the boundaries of the financial limits that it historically has. What's the reason behind that? Has something changed in the business? Did somebody make a mistake, or is there literally fraud in the making? And we definitely leverage robotics, and we leverage artificial intelligence to approach that use case right there. But our roadmap is much broader, and we are looking at those as kind of the cornerstones and the pillars to help our customers be more efficient in the function of finance, once again with the goal of getting 75% of their work to be automated, right? So taking the drudgery out of the work and allowing them to refocus those key resources on the strategic parts of the business to both improve it as well as help pave the way forward in highly competitive markets.
And here we are in 2020, and even though we're in the second week, it still feels kind of weird saying that year out loud, and it is a new decade as well. So is there anything else out there that excites you about the technological advancements ahead? Yeah,
so first of all, I would argue every quarter and every year at Trintech is an exciting time. We are in such the infancies of this marketplace. And there is literally so much for us to do, and it's how rewarding it is to be able to work with not only our current customer base, but our future customer base, our prospect customer base, and evolving our product set. For moving into 2020, we've got a couple of really big focuses. One is we're launching this next quarter, at the end of the quarter, an analytics component that literally gives our customers the ability to analyze at varying altitudes their financial close process, the efficiencies of their financial close process, so they can continue to refine it and improve upon it. And that's really exciting for us. So, in tech words, we would call that a big data play. And we certainly are leveraging a variety of big data technologies on the back end and visualization technologies on the front end to bring that to our customers. So we're really excited about that. The second is in the mid-market space, it is all about productivity. And part of that productivity is ease of use. We've been told by our customers and by the overall market that ADRA is one of the easiest financial close solutions to implement. And the time to value, the time to realize ROI is one of the best in the industry, but we're not done yet. And so we've got a variety of things planned over the next couple of quarters that will continue to make the product easier to set up, easier to use, easier to change, and easier to integrate with back-end ERP systems and other sources of data that are key to departments of finance.
And for anyone listening, can you just point them in the right direction of where they can find you online? And also, is there a way of contacting your team if they're left with more questions after our conversation today?
Yeah, so I think one of the easiest places to start is at the Trintech website, trintech.com. And you'll be greeted with a big kind of greeting that'll ask you whether you're a large enterprise customer or a mid-market customer. And I think the way to look at that is the complexity of your business, revenue sizes, transaction sizes. But one general rule of thumb, if you've got a single ERP and you are classified for other reasons as a mid-market company, start down that mid-market path. We've got some great information, videos, walkthroughs that help to explain what are fairly complex terms to both accountants as well as non-accountants to get a gist of what we do. And you can certainly interact with our employee base on that website, schedule up calls with a human being either in Europe or in the United States, and we certainly schedule demos and have a variety of other things. We are a very high-touch organization when it comes to our customers, and we realize that a part of this sale is a consultative sale, and we're really fortunate to have some people who are not only really knowledgeable about financial close and the financial close process, but it's their passion. They truly they emit passion around this topic. And that'd be one of the best ways to get engaged with them and get started on that process.
And that passion you speak of really shines through. And there's so much that I've enjoyed about today's conversation. And yes, Trintech's mission to take the drudgery out of accounting and make it faster, more efficient, and ultimately more human is inspiring on its own. And for me, it's that perfect balance that you guys have got between leveraging technology, but also your own personal outlook for life, sense of community, love of the great outdoors, and making a difference. It's just so refreshing to hear. So a huge thank you for taking the time to share that story with me today.
Neil, I appreciate you spending the time with me.
Man, I need to get myself out to Dallas, Texas and see those Longhorns close up. And what I loved about today's conversation was, yes, learning all about Trintech and how they're helping businesses transform their financial processes and not lose the human element. But also that very valid point that we came across there about how people in the tech industry ironically want to walk away from tech and get back in sync with nature and this tiny planet in which we all reside. Food for thought indeed. But over to you. What did you think of today's interview? Do you have anything to add to today's conversation? Or would you just like to ask a question or even come on the podcast? You can do all that and more by simply emailing me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. You can find me on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter by looking for me at Neil C. Hughes. And of course, if you'd like to work with me, you need help with your business blogs or launching your own podcast, my website is techblogwriter.co.uk. So a huge thank you to Derick for coming on and sharing his story, and an even bigger thank you to each and every one of you out there for tuning in. So thanks for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.